Hello, today we're going to become more familiar with FERPA. What is FERPA? FERPA is the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act. It's a federal law that protects the confidentiality of student education records. FERPA applies to all schools that receive federal funding for any program administered by the Department of Education. Our board policy states that the principal is the official custodian of records in his or her building. Student education records in all formats and media, including photographic and electronic, are those records that relate directly to a student. The district shall comply with FERPA and its regulations, as well as state law governing the confidentiality of student education records. So who is granted rights under FERPA? Parents are granted rights on behalf of their children, and those rights then transfer to the students when they turn 18 or attend a post-secondary institution. Rights under FERPA include the ability to prevent the disclosure of personally identifiable information, or PII. They also have the right to access and review student education records, and they can also request the correction of these records. Education records include student grades, immunization and health records, disciplinary records, student progress reports, academic or physical testing results, grade point average, and attendance records, and these are all confidential. Items that are not a part of an educational record are private records that a teacher makes during the course of teaching, and law enforcement or campus security records created and maintained solely for law enforcement reasons. Who has access to these records without consent? This means that parents do not have to give consent in order for the schools to give out this information. These include school officials, officials of other schools, school educational agencies. For financial aid purposes, these include government agencies and private banks, representatives of the U.S. Attorney General for law enforcement purposes, and in response to a subpoena. Directory information is not considered harmful if disclosed, and FERPA allows schools to disclose this information without consent, as long as they provide public notice to families explaining what types of information the school has designated as directory information. Examples of directory information include name, address, telephone number, date of birth. Leonie Hampson stated that with the explosion of use of ed tech tools, there's increased disclosures happening and data that isn't really being protected. So how does this impact your classroom? First of all, we need to be careful of the technology we use in our lessons. So don't use websites that require students to enter their personal information. We have to keep any student data we have secure. So that means keeping graded materials or gradebooks in a secure place. And we have to be careful of discussing student information with others unless they have a legitimate educational goal. We also want to be able to respond to access requests, so make sure that we know who our students' legal guardians are. Schools also have to be aware of online vendors, and we need to be careful of apps and websites that offer free services. As they're using those services, they could be getting paid in education records. FERPA has become out of touch with modern classrooms and the digital age, according to Forsman, 2019. So some things that we need to consider as we are entering this modern age are safety and security. So SROs, or school resourcement officers, and law enforcement can be considered school officials. This only comes into play if the district has outsourced the function of providing safety and security for the school or district to the law enforcement unit officials. A threat assessment team may have PII disclosed to them even if they're not employees of the school, and as long as they are there to determine a health or safety emergency. So things to consider as we evaluate that situation: they must be there to perform an institutional service or function for which the district would otherwise use employees. They are under direct control of the district with respect to the use and maintenance of education records. They are subject to FERPA's use and redisclosure requirements, and they qualify as school officials with legitimate educational interests. Immigration and Customs Enforcement. Schools are considered to be a sensitive location in which ICE officers and agents are to refrain from enforcement actions unless there is an extraordinary circumstance involving public safety. The Department of Homeland Security and its ICE Bureau is permitted to have access to student records in order to monitor the state of international students. Surveillance cameras. About 80% of schools are using surveillance cameras in order to ensure school safety. Images of students captured on surveillance recordings qualify as educational records when phone or video is directly related to a student and is maintained by the educational institution. So whether a recording is directly related to a student is a context-specific determination considering the following factors. First of all, whether the recording is used for disciplinary action involving the student, whether the recording depicts an activity that would result in the use of disciplinary action, if the video shows a student violating the law or shows a student getting injured, attacked, victimized, ill, or having a health emergency, whether the school intends to make a specific student the focus of the recording, and whether the content contains PII from an educational record. In these instances, they are all directly related to a student and are considered educational content. Data destruction. As we are getting rid of our information, we have to be mindful in how we do so. So non-electronic data should be shredded or pulverized. As we are destructing technology data, talk to your IT professional to make sure that the deletion is consistent with technology best practice standards. And our district should create formal documented processes for data destruction within our organization. FERPA enforcement. If the department finds that an educational agency or institution has violated FERPA, the department will work with the educational agency or institution to bring it into compliance. Only those instances where the educational agency or institution is unwilling or unable to come into voluntary compliance with the law and it is otherwise appropriate will the department withhold federal funds. So it sounds like they're going to do everything they can to make sure that it's right, and if you're just unwilling, that's when you're going to start losing those federal funds. Here are some ways to ensure your school is FERPA compliant. First of all, we can raise awareness. Next, we need to know the rights and protections and exceptions. 3, choose compliant vendors. 4, train all school employees. 5, implement compliant policies and procedures. And lastly, encrypt files and emails. I hope you all learned a lot about FERPA today and some steps that we can take to protect our students' information. So here are my references.